Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay, great. So thank you everyone very much for coming to tonight's panel discussion. Our topic is PQC versus QKD. So it might sound like this will just be a debate, but my hope is that it will actually be a kind of a friendly, more friendly discussion. Nonetheless, I have asked two of our panelists to make sure that the arguments for QKD are presented and earnestly defended, and they are Norbert Lütkenhaus from IQC Waterloo and Romana Wolf from ETH Zurich. And likewise, we have two panelists who will make sure that the arguments for PQC are presented and earnestly defended, and they are Ray Perlner from NIST and Scott Fluhrer from Cisco. So a little bit about the plan for tonight. So my hope was that we could kind of very quickly get past what I believe are some kind of baseline points of agreement for maybe even everyone working in these two areas, and quickly get to the sort of interesting tension or disagreement points. So the way we'll do this is I will make 4 statements, 2 for QKD and 2 for PQC. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to just sort of with one word either agree or disagree. And then we're going to continue to opening statements, and then we'll go from there. And there will hopefully be some time for Q&A at the end. Okay? So, first, the first 2 statements for QKD. So the first one is that QKD and quantum cryptography in general is interesting science that we should pursue vigorously. So panelists, agree, disagree?
Agree.
Agree, and even more.
Weakly agree.
I agree.
Okay, very good. Good. Okay, so second statement for QKD. In order to reach widespread adoption, QKD requires changes to our hardware infrastructure. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Agree as well?
Agree.
Yes, I also agree.
Okay, good. So now 2 statements for PQC. So statement number 1 is, actually it's a bit of a 2-parter. So part A is P is not equal to NP. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
From what I hear, most people believe that not to be true.
That's fair. Yeah.
Agree.
I also agree.
Okay, and part B is that public key cryptography, including post-quantum public key cryptography, exists. So, for a little bit of motivation, if you heard the talks yesterday, there were lots of, beautiful theory results about what kind of cryptography we can do depending on whether, P is equal to NP or one-way functions exist or whatever. But this statement claims that at the end of the day, when we go out to do cryptography, we believe that we live in cryptomania. We believe that public key encryption does exist and it's a thing that we can use. So, agree, disagree, public key encryption exists.
Agree.
I hope.
Agree.
I disagree.
Okay, excellent. So now we have some things to explain. Okay, very good. So, so now we're going to pass to opening statements. So, starting with Ray, please, each of you give a few minutes of your position and whatever else you'd like to say.
Well, start. Yep. I think no. Hello. Yep. Okay. So I will start by saying the question is QKD versus PQC. What are we trying to solve? And I think what we're trying to solve is we're trying to replace current uses of cryptography with something that will survive quantum computers. And I don't think QKD is ready to do that now, and maybe not ever. There are a lot of things we do with cryptography that I have no idea how you can do with QKD, like digital signatures. And if you just look at the way people use cryptography on the internet, it's very, very difficult to see how you replace things that people do. I mean, people like to connect via Wi-Fi, via cell phones, whereas QKD stuff, needs line of sight or it needs a direct fiber optic link. Then there's also the issue of distance limitation, which can't be solved unless you have quantum repeaters, which, I don't think we even have prototypes for that. So it's very difficult. So then the question is, okay, really the only game in town is post-quantum cryptography. How can we convince ourselves it's secure? And well, I mean, there's no mathematical proof so far, but experience has shown that at some point attacks seem to slow down, and maybe at some point they will even stop. So we've seen, some of the oldest public key cryptography out there is RSA. Now that's not post-quantum secure, but basically all the attacks we know about arose in maybe the first 20 years after RSA was published, and since then it's been like tiny incremental improvements. So maybe we know that it's classically hard, and so the hope is that we can find something that's hard even in the post-quantum world. And finally, there's just, as a practical matter, security problems on the internet are mostly not coming from the cryptography that everyone thinks is secure at the time isn't. They're coming from people using cryptography that's way out of date, bad random number generators, bad code, malware, et cetera, et cetera. So I think post-quantum cryptography will be up to the job.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Norbert?
Okay, for me, actually, the question is not QKD or post-quantum. It's actually, for me, basically both. Basically, the future will be just do a combination thereof. I think basically very important for that discussion is for us really to understand that post-quantum cryptography and QKD are different things. They achieve different things, have different properties. So therefore, it's absolutely true that basically the QKD does not offer all the comfort of public key cryptography. Clear, right? As well, I'm not so sure whether indeed basically QKD would be able to cover everything about our connected world, including IoT, right? I don't think so. Right? So the question is basically, but on the other hand, QKD has basically the one thing, it has protocol security, which is very important if we want to talk about long-term security. Yes, there are issues like implementation security, which is as well true, I think as well for classic cryptography, and that's basically something that has been already mentioned. So there are different things, different statements, different time horizons, different claims. It is very different ability. And we just have to figure out how do those things work together? What is the overall quantum safe solution that actually does the trick for our world? And that is something that we have to find out.
Okay, Scott?
Okay, Scott Fluhrer, I feel like I have to make this disclaimer. I am not speaking for Cisco Systems. These are my opinions. There are people in Cisco which would strongly disagree with them. Basically, there are things that in PQC can solve, which quantum QKD cannot. For example, encrypted storage, or for that matter, if you look at it hard, encrypted email. On the other hand, what QKD can do, which is secure communication between two devices online at the same time, PQC can also solve that problem. The only thing that QKD claims is that it has a better security model, but I would say that it has a different security model. It does remove some of the attacks against that would apply to PQC, but it also adds its own additional weaknesses. Now, if we come up with device-independent QKD, that reduces some of the more major attacks, such as it addresses most side channel attacks, and also the need for trusted repeaters, but we do not have that practically speaking yet. In addition, one of the things I hear fantasize about is a internet QKD, a global QKD network. I see that as implausible simply because of expense. How much would it cost to actually to create such a thing, and who would actually pay for it? Would a government pay for it when they may want to protect their own someone else's traffic? Be honest, I don't see that, as opposed to saying people, let's use go use PQC when plausible, and have people protect their own traffic. There is one nice thing about QKD I will mention. There is one possibility that it can eventually evolve into the ability to do a true quantum network where you actually be able to connect two different quantum computers and actually exchange qubits. That's something that you cannot do classically, and that's why I like to see more research into QKD.
Okay, Romana.
Okay, so I would like to put your attention to two aspects I think are important when we discuss the pros and cons of PQC versus QKD, which are a bit in line with what Norbert already said. The first one is that, for me, PQC and QKD try to provide solutions to a problem on different time scales. So PQC is something we can directly implement. We have the hardware, and it can offer a solution that we can use right now. But it's not a long-term solution, because we always have to update security parameters, and we can never be sure that the scheme we're using is actually secure and it's not broken. QKD, on the other hand, it will need some more time to mature. It needs some more research, some more investments. But at some point, and I believe we will reach this point, QKD will be a mature technology that can be widely used. And from this point on, it provides security for the remainder of the lifespan of humanity, let's say, because it cannot be broken. So we have to keep in mind when comparing the two approaches that what timescale we're talking about. And I advocate for QKD to be the ultimate solution, the long-term solution, not the thing we're using in the next 5 years. And the second point I think is important is that we have to distinguish between protocol security and implementation security when comparing the two approaches. And here, I think implementation security, here PQC and QKD, they're actually not fundamentally different. Both suffer from the fact that imperfections of the devices open up side channel attacks. But this is something that is true for both approaches. PQC simply has the advantage that we have much more experience in classical hardware. We have studied that for much longer than quantum hardware. But this advantage will vanish over time when we get more experience with quantum hardware. And regarding protocol security, QKD certainly has the advantage because we have mathematical security proofs. And I would like to emphasize that we have quantitative security proofs. So we can get QKD can tell us the probability that a scheme gets broken, whereas post-quantum cryptography cannot tell you what the key sizes you should use for it to be secure, which is why we continuously have to update the security parameters. So I think these 2 points are very important to keep in mind when we compare the pros and cons. And lastly, I would like to comment on the disagreement I had with the last question in the lightning round. And I have to say, I don't feel very strongly about whether PQC exists or not, because for me, it's not that relevant long-term. I really bet on QKD. But if I had to decide, like in this question round, I would say no, because history doesn't provide much evidence for the existence of hard problems. Like if you look back, most of the encryption schemes, they have eventually been broken. So for me, it's not that certain that PQC actually exists. And I would like to conclude my opening statement with a thought that now when we're regarding quantum computers, we're still searching for, like we're still researching what these devices are capable of. We don't know yet what problems they're good at. So for me, it's a bit risky to base the security of my communication on the belief that certain problems are hard for a device whose capabilities we don't understand at all yet.
Okay, let's thank our speakers. So now I have to apologize because I made an omission, and it was very unfair to the QKD side, because I forgot my fourth statement in the lightning round, which was the PQC con. and it's the following. So I'm going to again ask you to agree or disagree. And the statement is, Cyc and Rainbow getting broken was at least somewhat surprising. Okay, so if you're not familiar, Cyc and Rainbow are a key encapsulation mechanism and a digital signature scheme that made it quite far in the NIST PQC process and were broken shortly around the time of the final round. So this was at least somewhat surprising. Agree, disagree?
Agree.
Yeah, I agree as well.
Cyc, not surprising. Rainbow, somewhat surprising.
I disagree.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so now for the next sort of phase, I'd like to sort of proceed round robin and give people a chance to maybe rebut some of the things that the other side said, ask each other questions, however you like to proceed. I guess it's okay if you want to pass, but if people start passing too much, then I'm going to start asking uncomfortable questions, and you'll sooner or later have to start answering. So, so go ahead, Ray. Let's just go in the same order.
Okay. Since it's fresh in my mind, I'd like to comment a little bit on Cyc and Rainbow. So it was surprising that they got broken, that it took as long as it did, like that it happened sort of close to the last minute. But at the same time, in both cases, these were not like the most studied candidate. So if you looked at the crypto systems we got, like a third of them or something were lattice-based crypto systems, and there was a small number of multivariate and only one isogeny scheme. So there was just a smaller community to look at these things. But I guess what it does show is that it shows the value of having the NIST PQC standardization process where these things were publicized heavily, and it gave a lot of people more of an opportunity to look at them. And I think that really sped up the ability to know how hard the cryptographic problems behind these things are. I would also comment that while Rainbow, the parameters were broken, you still could come up with secure parameters for something like Rainbow. So it was not as thorough a break as Cyc.
Okay, first thing is I have made this time mistake. Actually, my answer was I was not surprised that something is broken. And as well, I remember a talk by Adi Shamir, I think. He said a crypto system is secure if it hasn't been broken for 13 years. And 13 years are not up, right? So obviously some of things will be broken, right? So that's basically the one thing. But maybe it's a slight change of topic. I mean, before that, I said basically one important thing is for us to understand that QKD and PQC are not the same thing. They don't do the same job. They have different security statements. They have different properties, what they solve, how they deploy. I think from Scott, I hear that you agree on see this as similar. They are different.
Yeah.
So maybe I can ask, do you agree that they are different?
Yes, they're definitely different.
Okay, no, I think because basically just for a discussion, basically I think it's very important basically for some of those steps basically make sure that we understand that one. Because it's now a different discussion than if you would say one subsumes the other one, because then we can say, oh, one's more practical than the other thing. The moment if you say that they're different, right, the fact that they have basically different practicality, different timescales, so on, maybe does not, in the long term of thing, will not matter. Right? So if you say they're different, so then also the question, okay, what does it now mean for us deployment, right? Because for me, the next question is as well, basically, and at the moment I said, the other thing I said, basically, the important difference, basically, or advantage of QKD is long-term security, right? And that comes from the protocol security, that's one thing. But we know, of course, protocol security does not buy us the final statement, right? I mean, everyone who ever had summer school or my lecture in QKD, knows that one thing we never, ever, ever say is that QKD is of advantage because the security is guaranteed by the laws of nature.
I've heard that plenty of
Right.
times from QKD marketing literature.
Right, but fortunately, those guys over here who have been as well to my summer school, my lecture, don't say that one. But I agree. But that's very important to understand. And really, as Romana as well, indeed, this difference between protocol security, which we have, is a mathematical theorem from assumption this thing follows. It's not for implementation. That alone doesn't do thing. Important thing is as well as what Romana said, of course, now for implementation, we talk about implementation side channels. And here's basically the question about what about those side channels? If we say PQC has side channels, QKD has side channels, are we back to the same square? No, we are not, right? Because QKD has basically the protocol security, PQC has not. That means you can do store now, decrypt later, if we find basic security parameter and didn't fit. For the side channels over here, right? Typically side channels you need, typically, and we have to be careful, there are footnotes to that, right? Side channels you need to typically exploit at the time that you do the key establishment. If you didn't do it then, forget about it. Therefore, what I usually say is the security of QKD is not it's secure because of the law of nature, but QKD keys are secure for all future as they were at the time of creation. So if there was no attack possible or known at the time to do QKD, it's constant over time. It does not degrade. For post-quantum, we have to be worried about, are there more algorithms, breaks on the protocol? What is the computational power for the parameters that we've been choosing the key length for? So we have to be worried about that one, right? Okay. So, and that is, as I said, just the one property, and then of course there are the drawbacks of QKD.
So if I can just,
I have a question about that statement that security is eternal. What do you use for the QKD? What do you use the QKD keys for? Typically, what I hear is that they're used to generate as AES keys. Now, AES does not have that property. Does that mean that we've just thrown away the advantage that QKD is supposed to give us?
No, that's why I'm careful. And I talked about the keys. No, I mean, I completely, so again, we need to be step by step. So the keys have that property. Now is the question, okay, now if I do the one-time pad without side channels, if possible, right, then of course, great. But if I do the AES, say, a basic expansion of it, what now? Right? And that is true, right? The thing is basically now we can think about what is the use. Basically, if I want to protect my network overall, maybe I don't need as much communication. I can do it with a one-time pad. If I want to do one-time pad decryption of every single email, video conference on, probably not, right? But indeed, that's the next step question on that. Okay. I agree.
Okay. Another thing, going back to an earlier statement, you said that we don't have any post-quantum algorithms older than 30 years. That is not correct. We have Michaelis, which goes back, I think, 45 years.
Okay, I agree. But then I have to see how long have quantum code breakers trying to attack it, right? And so that is now something basically at the moment. Basically, there are one thing, of course, is the classical attacks, the classical. But now about as far as Romana already said, basically, of course, we need to see what does a quantum computer can do. And the thing is, and there's of course the thing when it compares the time scale. 13 years means 13 years of the wide existing community of people doing cryptanalysis, right? Compared to how many years we have, it's a much smaller community. Probably I don't know, maybe 5 researchers worldwide could be able to really work on that problem, right? So that is a much smaller community, right? And while we really understand what is even the fundamental model and limitation.
Also, regarding that, I would say that even though the scheme is older, PQC has only received a lot of attention in the past, say, decade or something. So now in the last years, people have really tried to attack this, and many people have tried to attack this. And I actually have a question to Ray, maybe as a representative of NIST, or maybe also to you as a potential user of post-quantum cryptography. So it's about the NIST standardization competition. And as I understand it, I would say the standardization is a kind of replacement for the lack of a security proof, which we of course don't have for computational cryptography, but the computation gives an opportunity to have many people try and attack schemes that are proposed before they're standardized. But of course, there's a non-negligible probability that an attack will be found after the standardization has happened. And I would guess that after a scheme has been standardized, many people implement it and use it. So at this point, if an attack is found, it will directly affect tons of implementation. Is there like a plan you have, a backup plan in case that happens? Because I would say the probability is really not close to zero in this case.
So, so there are a number of backup plans that one might consider. So one thing that has been proposed in industry, and we've made an effort to accommodate, although we don't require it, is the use of multiple crypto systems. So until the quantum computers come, elliptic curve cryptography, is a fairly low cost and very well-studied classical crypto system. And so a lot of people have proposed doing protocols where the session key is a combination of something encrypted with a post-quantum scheme and with elliptic curve. Now, we also have a fourth round. So we've currently standardized a KEM, Kyber, which the standard will be coming out soon. But we're also studying in the fourth round several code-based crypto systems, which we may standardize later, which if we standardize one of those, it will give something someone might switch to if a problem is found with lattice-based cryptography.
Also, I would actually turn the question back to you. What we've seen is security flaws from implementation defects far outnumber security flaws due to cryptographical advances. What if we do, in fact, widely deploy lots of QKD systems and find that later a significant number of them have this fundamental implementation flaw? What do? Do we go around and replace all the hardware? If a similar problem happens in post-quantum, ideally, we could publish a software update. But if it's a problem in hardware, does that mean somebody has to go in and replace every single hardware unit?
I actually think that's not a question you only pose to QKD, because the very same thing could happen with classical hardware. You could find a hardware, an implementation mistake in all the classical hardware you're using. So, I mean, yes, if you find a mistake with the hardware, you have to replace the hardware and patch it. But that's not specific to quantum key distribution. That's just for all of cryptographic hardware, I would say.
So if I can jump in for a second, I want to go back to something that Norbert was saying earlier, which is that PQC and QKD are different things. They kind of fulfill different roles. And I think kind of everybody on the panel sort of agreed with that. So could we talk a little bit about, maybe Norbert, you can start with, what roles you think they fill, how do you see them coming together? And also maybe we could get to like what the timeline is, because presumably the answer is very different for, what roles will they perform in the next 5 to 10 years versus what roles they might perform in, 50 years.
Right. So that's basically the question as well first of what's immediate use cases, right? So I mean, usually as well, what sets the immediate use case, of course, limited deployments like backup center, really point-to-point connections, right? And where you deploy it within today's capability, right? And then basically we go from there over trusted nodes, where that makes sense. For example, in an organization that has enough anyway nodes that it's already securing, you can actually use this one as a hop, right? And so, but of course, these are all the things basically that expands a little bit, but it does not go to the full service provider part, right? We hear as well from some telecoms who actually say, no, but service provider model, our customer would believe us, we protecting it and sell the key to you. We have to see whether indeed the market takes it up, because I mean, in the end of the day, it's really the market development in that one. But the question is as well, we hear from other telecoms actually where say, no, it's not so much about the service provider model, we sell key to others, but we want to secure our own network. Right? So for us, it's important our network as critical infrastructure actually stays secure long-term, that we can do this. And here comes as well the question for us, of course, whether that one is now taken up or not, depends as well a little bit about how the technology develops, right? Because we hear as well about the cost of QKD. But now the cost of a QKD device compared to the cost of the other equipment that you have, and of course Cisco sells enough of the other equipment, right? And we talk about, like we hear, for example, about continuous variable QKD, where the technology starts to merge basically with what we do in modern optical communication technology. Right? So maybe one part of that one might be it actually merged more or less in the same equipment, and it can do QKD or it can do the classical communication. That is something that indeed we have to see. And I think basically this really is a part of for us really to understand basically what is the advantage, the use cases, how do they fit together. And so this is the usual thing that is not a regular just science problem. You think about the question and then you calculate the answer, and that's the deployment. Because it as well depends on engineering, it depends as well on regulation that's coming in there, basically how the market will be moving, and that actually will be seeing. But I think really very, very important is really basically for us really the need for we need to identify what are the applications that need long-term security, right? Because here's again thing, if we look at all ways, like say, you look up what is a recommendation for RSA key length, right? So the different countries come in there and they have a table to say, we recommend if you have this your time resolution, use this key over here. But these tables go, I think, typically up to maybe 10 years, right? But what about all personal information, health information, critical government information that has a longer term time scale? What do we do about it? I mean, the thing is basically, I'm not saying obviously QKD solves everything of that one, but it says really there is a need. How can we obtain long-term security, right? And so that is really, I think, very important for us to figure out.
So I want to have Romana answer this question too, and then Scott and Ray, you can maybe. So you seem very distrusting of public key cryptography, and maybe that's a fair description, maybe it's not. But somehow, don't you need PQC also? You know, at least in the intermediate term, and maybe actually forever, because after all, if you're trying to achieve the everlasting security that we were talking about earlier, what about the authentication problem?
Yes, so I do agree that definitely in the next, I don't know, say 10 to 20 years, PQC is very important to secure communication, and also long term we will need it. We need it to coexist with QKD. For example, things like digital signatures we cannot do with QKD. We need PQC for that. But you mentioned the authentication, and here. So I would disagree that we necessarily need PQC. You can also achieve authentication on an information theoretic security, if you have trusted parties, for example. So I'm not sure if we necessarily need PQC for that, but I think it's certainly an option to use it for that, because the lack of a security proof here is not that vital in the long-term security, because the authentication would have to be broken while it's executed. So here certainly a combination of QKD and PQC is a very good option in terms of the security. And another point I would like to make is that what I think is very important in this whole process of making QKD a widely usable technology is the standardization of it. That actually organizations that do standardize things find ways to do it for QKD, so that people who buy this technology that are not necessarily experts in this, they have something a reliable guarantee that the scheme they're buying is secure. But I also think that all of this, it will take a couple of decades until this actually happens, until we're at the point where QKD is really a reliable, widely usable technology, because we need, for example, quantum repeaters. And for me, also, ultimately, I think what we need is device-independent QKD. When we're at that point, then I personally think we really have a long-term secure communication technology.
So,
Oh,
Scott,
sorry.
Ray, I want you
Okay.
to
Yeah.
just a second, sorry, Scott. So one particular thing I want you to definitely respond to is, it seems like, oh, is it off? Okay, this is better. Sorry, so one thing I definitely want you to respond to is this, maybe almost as strongly as Romana feels about, PQC, it seems a little bit like you and Ray feel like maybe there isn't even any need for QKD at any point. So particularly talking about this sort of everlasting security, this sort of like souped up version of perfect forward secrecy, if you will. Even long term, do you see a role for QKD?
I see. I'm omitted it from. I forgot it about in my opening statement. I see it as a niche. Right now, it is a very narrow niche. Basically, a single organization with units not too far away that need to communicate securely. With the device-independent QKD, it becomes a rather larger niche. Still, you have range limitations because you can't have zillions of repeaters, but you still it becomes a bit cleaner. Now, one of the things that you need to have for a true quantum internet is repeaters which can handle hundreds of millions of qubits per second, and untrusted repeaters who can handle that rate. That's going to be a long time, and as far as I can see it, the only realistic way to have something like a quantum internet is to actually have something which distributes tangled qubits. And there's a killer app on quantum computers which we really want to do worldwide.
I'm going to make a quick answer to that. I want to emphasize here that all the technology that we need to realize a QKD network is strictly simpler to achieve than having a quantum computer. So if you believe that eventually we will have a universal quantum computer, then we will also have quantum networks, like fully device-independent quantum networks over long distances.
So I want to give Ray a chance to jump in, and then you can go.
Yeah. I only thought we should maybe focus on the cryptographic application in itself.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, sort of encrypting quantum information and doing distributed quantum computing, also extremely interesting things. I think I don't even need to ask you whether you agree, but let's stay focused on cryptography as much as we can. So, but Ray, please.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so I do agree to some extent that if you can build a quantum computer, you should be able to build a quantum network. The question is, at what cost and what kind of speed of communication can you achieve? So a quantum computer can be very slow and still be, useful for breaking cryptography. But yeah, I do actually see some application for this everlasting security guarantee, and it's you see actually there's sort of several ways you can get a better guarantee. For example, even if you're using AES with your secret, then you can still say maybe I trust AES more than I trust public key chem. You also have the possibility of authenticating the quantum channel with a digital signature, and if the digital signature is broken later, that doesn't allow you to read the key that was exchanged earlier. So there are better guarantees, assuming the side channels, et cetera, are the same. Another point, though, against the value is a lot of times when people think they want confidentiality, they don't really want confidentiality. Like, I want to keep my password secret, but the reason I want to keep my password secret is not anything about the password. It's just I want to be able to log into a system. I want to, prove who I am. So this is really an authentication thing. And so if I change my password, someone decrypts it later, it's not a problem. So it is really a fairly narrow application where you really want secrecy and for ever, forever, forever.
So Norbert,
Okay.
you want to?
Okay, sorry. Just one thing I remembered to comment on. One advantage, the authentication problem appears to be much easier than the key exchange problem in the post-quantum realm. We have signature algorithms which are completely symmetric based, and those are arguably more trustable than, say, a true post key exchange.
Go ahead, Norbert. I think maybe.
So I mean, yeah, maybe the first part over here. Basically, it's indeed when we say a niche application, that really comes together, indeed fits together with. If you think about cryptography, what is the market of indeed functionality that only public key can offer, right? And that is basically really a huge part, right? So I'm completely fine with QKD in that definition to be a niche, right? Because that niche is overall, I believe, still big enough and important enough. Right? And so the thing is basically how big is the market really? As I said, that just depends on many factors. Let's work on it. The important thing is basically, does the niche have a justification? And then the question is separate from to say, basically, oh, how big will it be? Because it depends on many other aspects. So basically, that is, I think, basically the first point. And I want to make a second point. No, what did you say again? Because I was connecting to what you're saying just before. Oh yeah, about the authentication. I think that is very important because that's something we hear as well, right? So that the problem of QKD is because it needs some initial authentication, because we need to authenticate our public channel. With this one authentication, we are there. Right? As Romana already said, the important difference is this authentication basically does not need to be long-term secure. If it's broken the next day, you don't care, right? Our key is still secure. This does not change. I see this one overall because it's very often said, oh, but in post-quantum we don't need it. So in my view is about, no, that's not true. If I use a public key, well, I need to trust it that it's really the public key of the receiver. So there is a trust structure behind it. Right? So it's not like basically post-quantum does not at all have something like it. It's of course a little bit different. I mean, again, trusting that a certain this public key I hold really comes from that person is, I think, a little bit different issue from saying, oh, I do message authentication between two parties. So that's I think that's taken. But indeed, we need to be aware, but PQC and QKD has some underlying trust structure, either for distributing the public keys or actually doing actually the authentication of the public channel. And I just wonder as well, basically, how you are seeing this issue.
So just briefly, before you guys continue, I do want to get to some questions from the audience. So if you have a question, I'm going to ask you to just very slowly move over here and line up in front of that mic stand and think about a very brief and to the point question that you want to ask. And you guys continue, please.
I would like to comment on the what you said about QKD being more of a niche. And I think when people say that QKD is a niche application, they still have in mind that like the current status of QKD, that we have small key rates, we have no quantum repeaters, and the hardware is expensive. But if you imagine a point in the future where the hardware is cheaper, where we have repeaters, then I think this niche is actually a rather large niche. So there will be more interesting use cases when everything is a bit easier and cheaper to use.
Okay, so do you want to respond quickly, Scott? Or?
Yeah. Question: how much data do you think goes over the internet on a daily basis? If we're going to exchange keys for all that data, how much data would have to go over our QKD network?
Okay, I'm afraid I have no idea.
I mean, just maybe to be, because you aim at basically, can we provide enough key? I mean, it's very clear basically if all communication that goes over optical networks, it will be always much, the speed of classical optical communication will be always by magnitude be higher than QKD key, right? So therefore, we do not have the option to do one-time pad encryption of every damn bit that flies around the internet. But I think that's as well not the point and not the need for it.
I would say even considering AES keys to protect it, still it's a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go to questions. So yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, first, I think this is a very good panel and a very interesting treatment of this important subject. So, but in keeping with your method of questioning, I'll ask you all if you agree or disagree with the statement I'm about to make. And that is, I think we're missing a wonderful opportunity in the United States right now, and it has to do with NIST. I would love for NIST to create a standards program for QKD. I mean, we're letting ETSI do it. We're letting ITU do it. We don't do that. This country never does that. I think NIST would do a great job in making QKD everything you all wish it would become. And it's a lot closer than some of you think. But do you agree or disagree?
Go ahead.
Don't say
You can abstain if it makes you uncomfortable.
I will disagree.
Okay. And
That's
go
it?
ahead for the rest of the panel.
No, I strongly agree. I think every country needs these activities. For me, basically, I'm very happy about the collaboration we have with the BSI in Germany, right, via ETSI activities. So I'm grateful. Manfred Lochter is actually here. But I really the support to understand, go the learning with the community through the process to enable actually going through certification and all the steps up, which is a longer process. And to go along with that, I think it's indeed, I think basically as well important learning opportunities for the institutions over here, right? And to go with us and of course the community types, yeah.
Okay. I would disagree. It is far too early. Until we have practical device independent, measurement independent QKDs, it's way too early to get NIST involved.
I would strongly disagree with your statement. Agree.
Wow.
You're just
I'm
being
so- yeah.
contrarian at this point.
No, I strongly agree. But I have a quick comment on what you just said, because I would say the same thing about the standardization procedure of the PQC problems. Or about that, I would say it needs a longer time frame to actually find a standard.
Yeah. NIST was under two constraints. One is to take enough time to actually come up with secure standards and be fast enough to actually get something out in the market to actually secure stuff, and hope that you can actually do both.
So, Ray,
But
could I
NIST
ask
is
you-
involved in
just a second,
DCQNet.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So you just you got a very long question. So, just a second.
All right.
So I want you to jump in here, Ray, because and maybe talk about like the demand for the standard, right? You know,
Right.
what was the sort of in terms of industry, especially.
Yeah, I mean, so the demand for the standards is pretty simple. We absolutely need post-quantum, or we absolutely need public key cryptography for the vast majority of things we do on the internet. And so we didn't have time to wait. We took as long as we could, and hopefully it was long enough.
Okay. Next question.
Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
In addition, remember, PQC is applicable to address problems that QKD cannot. For example, encrypted storage.
Go ahead, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just curious if the committee could comment on timing, like when will we need PQC? When do we think that QKD will be, ready to be deployed like at scale? So in other words, yeah, just curious on timing.
Okay. We can go in order.
Yeah.
You can
Okay.
give your best guess or whatever you like.
Well, I would say it really is dependent on where the technology is. I mean, so the reason you have a standard is so that many possibly mutually distrustful entities can communicate with each other and interoperate. And as long as there's this distance limitation where only parties that are very close to each other can communicate, where you're filling in distance gaps with trusted repeaters, et cetera, there is no real need for disparate organizations to coordinate on what they're doing. And a disadvantage of standardizing too early is that you freeze the technology at the current level, and all the arguments for QKD being something that will be widely used rely on the technology being much better than it is now.
I think it's very important to distinguish, basically, we talk about standardization and certification. Standardization of what? But I don't think we need to standardize the QKD layer, because I mean, point-to-point connection, we don't need interoperability between Alice and from one company and Bob from another one. That's at the moment absolutely, I think, not on the table. And it would basically indeed freeze technology and hamper us. What we have is indeed network interfaces, right? How do I export key to the next layer? That is something where we have the standards. Basically, the ETH standards are actually standards that are effectively being used. And that is something that we for sure need to do, but not the Alice and Bob to be integral. So that's not relevant at this time. The important thing is basically the other part is really certification. And that is really something what's the confidence. Is QKD doing what it's doing? And that is really when we talk now about implementation security. So I'm very happy that at least with ETH, we have now the protection profile for QKD, which we have actually done, which is undergoing the certification process with BSI at the moment, right? And I think that is a good first step. I mean, this one is not, we are not ready, right? I mean, there's probably no device out there that would really be ready at this moment to be certified against this protection profile, right? Nor do we have actually certification labs right now able to evaluate a security target for an actual device today. So we see there are more steps that we need until we come to the situation that we have indeed a certified QKD device. That means something which really does the best practice for implementation security today. So that is still a process which will still take a few years. This is not happening tomorrow, but we need to go that way, right? So that's probably, let me stop over here.
Go ahead, Scott. Should be up.
Okay.
Yeah.
As for PQC, I can see we are already starting the initial rollout now. I expect that to keep on continue for the next 10 to 15 years, simply because the problem is just too big.
Yeah, I find it extremely hard to give a time frame of when QKD will be ready. But I think, as Ray said, it extremely depends on how the technology is advancing. And this strongly depends on how much resources and investments we put into researching and developing QKD.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, we're talking a lot about the certification of PQC versus QKD, but it seems like maybe they're not playing on the same playing field. Because we have the PQC protocols that you're evaluating whether or not they can be broken completely. But when we're talking about an eavesdropper in QKD, we're talking about, can it theoretically be broken at all? We're not talking about a practical implementation of the eavesdroppers that we're trying to secure attacks against. So can you speak to that?
So maybe Ray, you can start.
So So I'm not very familiar with the actual standardization efforts that are going on right now, but I would say that it is essential that the practical things be addressed because, however good the protocol is, at the end of the day, you have a physical device where there are other ways of accessing that device than looking at what's going over the channel, and what's going over the channel isn't always what the protocol says it should be.
Go ahead, Norbert.
So if I understand your question correctly, it's basically to say, in the standardization that we do in PQC at the moment is focusing on the protocol. It says what is the key length, what protocol should we use. I'm not sure basically how much of the implementation of that one is actually part of the standardization thing, how much is actually fixed in there. While on the other hand, indeed, for QKD, we have basically two things. We need to have the security proof for the protocol that we implement. And here Manfred Lochter is probably looking and saying, yeah, indeed. As you think about all security of QKD, there are lots of papers out there. There's not a single paper for one protocol like decoy, which they step from first step to last step, writes it in one paper coherently up. Right? So we need to work on that one because a security proof of a particular QKD protocol need to specify every step exactly how you do it. And then it's mathematical theory. Right? There must be proof of it in one go. And to be honest, right, if we look about, we have basically effectively everything, but it's not exactly fitting. So we need to do this one. That's one thing, right? But otherwise, of course, when we talk about certification, the biggest part of certification over here is indeed in QKD looking towards implementation security, right? So that is really to have this trust over here that these best practice things about side channels and so on, that we can actually handle that one. Right? And that is something indeed that we are working and need some time. And it's a question basically, I mean, is that now on the equal footing with PQC? Right? I mean, so it's I think it's a different issue at the moment that is done over there, to my knowledge. Yeah. But I don't have as much insight indeed to which detail basically PQC is certified.
So Scott and Romana, do you want to jump in? Or?
I won't speak that. I don't know. I haven't gone into detail about QKD certification, so I won't talk about that. As for the PQC certification, is basically again based on largely known answer tests. We know exactly how the algorithm is supposed to work with these inputs. They verify that the algorithm does in fact do that.
And so regarding the standardization of QKD, I strongly agree with everything Norbert said. And I would like to add one thought about that. And that is that however the certification looks in the end, however we write down the mathematical proof of it, what we have to be very clear about is what assumptions go in. Because this is something that also in the QKD literature is not always made very precise. And I think this is extremely important to be clear about what the security proof applies to.
Okay, last question, please.
Okay, question 1, is entanglement distribution?
We won't hear question 2, so make it a good
Is
one.
entanglement distribution between stationary nodes the fundamental resource? 2, if so, it comes at a finite cost. Why will it be spent on crypto and not computing, simulation, or sensing?
So, did the question make sense, or?
No, sorry, I did not quite get the question.
So I think the question was, if we something like, if we have entanglement, why would we waste it on cryptography when we could instead use it for distributed computing?
Is entanglement distribution between stationary quantum memories the fundamental resource? 2, if that resource existed, would it be spent on crypto or would it be spent on computing, simulation, or distributed sensing?
Should I
Go ahead.
My best
give it a try.
Okay. I mean, so the thing is basically on the short term, right? Like most of QKD that we're using is prepared measure. We do not distribute entanglement. The moment we go indeed to quantum networks, then indeed entanglement is basically the important resource as we go into the quantum repeater, at least in the typical way that we think about it. Right? And that might be even questioned, right? Because you can do quantum repeat in a one-way fashion. There's no ever entanglement created, right? So that depends actually how it's going. And now the question is basically, if we have entanglement, what would we use for? I don't know. Right? Would it be really QKD, the main part of it, or would it be the quantum sensing, or is it really indeed connecting quantum computers, doing blind quantum computation, or something like that? We have to see, right? But whatever it is, I think at least QKD is a use case. I said, I know today why I would do it. Right? And then let's see basically what the resources and how we use it for.
I would also say it's actually not an either or question what we would do with it, because if at some point this is a resource that's widely available and reasonably cheap, we can do all of these things depending on what you're interested in doing.
So unfortunately, we're completely out of time. I want to end with another two-answer question. You have to pick one of the answers. So for each panelist, AES or one-time pad?
AES.
AES and one-time pad. Don't ask me about the phase of the superposition, but I think both of them.
AES, one-time pad is impractical.
One-time pad.
Very good. Okay, please join me in thanking our panelists.
And thanking Gorjan for a great moderation.